Hello and welcome back to No Longer Legally Detained, the podcast about... Sorry, I've actually been just fully distracted by the notification that came up from Riverside just then. Okay, start again. Scene. Hello and welcome back to No Longer Legally Detained, the podcast about life after the psych ward. How do you navigate being an adult when you never expected to be one? And that was a thumbs up for those who are just listening, not watching. Welcome back to the podcast. Happy Sunday. I have actually... Now Beverly sent me a message. Beverly, you're distracting me. For God's sake, woman. Let's put you on charge, actually, so you can't distract me. Right. Okay, Beverly, lovely. Too much. I'm here with Henry the Hippo Jellycat this week. Say hello, Henry. He's saying hello for those who are listening. This is actually take 2. I started recording this morning, and I actually was like I was in a coma. Got really stressed. Had a little scream. Decided I needed coffee. Went and got said coffee. It's in my hand for those who are listening, not watching. And went for a walk to get said coffee because, you know, we like to purchase our coffee because I don't drink alcohol. So I feel like actually it's fine to just buy coffee because you don't drink alcohol, you know what I mean? Anyway, now I've got a sore nail and actually, no, not a sore nail. Like my nail's like, what do you call it? Thing, and I need to pause actually because I can't focus until I've like filed it. Bear with, I'll be back. Okay, we're back. Completely lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so I went and got a coffee, then sat on a tree and recorded a TikTok because literally why not? I also went to Aldi to get bare orange juice because I'm having to take antibiotics because yesterday I spent the whole day in honey, which was really beautiful experience, best way to spend a Saturday. And I really struggle to take tablets. I'm better than I used to be. I used to not be able to take them at all. Now I can take them, but I need a lot of orange juice. So my student loan is going on coffee, orange juice, and trips to the hospital, apparently. But yeah, so I've got orange juice. Now I'm just messing with a nail file. I'm literally so chaotic today. So I've got orange juice because I need a lot of that to take my antibiotics. Got Henry the Hippo Jellycat. And yeah, life is a lot. So let's catch up what has been going on recently in my life. Well, very exciting. I'm going to the European Youth Parliament event this week in Strasbourg. It's my first time being abroad since 2015, which I'm really excited about. Also a little bit nervous. Well, I say that, like, that's literally the most autistic, like, I just said that because I should say it. Oh dear. I actually haven't thought about it because I am so stressed. Like, stressed with a capital STRESSED. Like, I am so stressed. And it's actually, like, I'm laughing about it because if you don't laugh, you cry, you know what I mean? And I feel like, you know, this is why I became a creative activist, even though it was, like, actually an accident because I didn't actually intend to become one. Like, I didn't even know, like, what it was. But anyway, this is not what this is about. Is I want to make, so cliche, but like I want to make a difference, I want to make a change, and like I feel like growing up life was like challenging, and I think that even now, like I follow do I follow that many? I don't actually follow that many people. Me and Sabrina were looking at this the other day when we were looking like through our followers list and like realised we're like, when you just follow like so many celebrities and you think, why do I do that? But anyway, I actually don't. She followed more celebrities. A tangent. We'll see if she's actually listening to this episode because she'll hear a little shout out to her. We shall see. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, and I think that like there is so much more like authentic content out there these days, but still there's like, you know, for like the everyday human being, like the people when they like often like share stuff, like not when they're like not, because like obviously I share for that like, in the activism space, and I think like that's again a different thing of like just showing like the mess of real life, and like not in like a triggering, obviously like triggering content, but like in just like a this is real life, like it's just it, and it's like okay, and it's like alright, and it's, you know, what's it called, like peaks and troughs, I think that's the word. I don't know, but yeah, I just want to show, because I think like sometimes even I'm always very authentic with what I post, like everything I post is always like true, and I think it's hard though because there's a lot of people, like not a lot of people actually, that's so like there were people who say, like, especially when they say it to my mum, they're like, oh my gosh, you know, it's amazing how honest she is and like how she just shares everything online. I don't share everything online. Like, I just very much clarify that to begin this. Like, I really don't. Like, this is literally such a small percentage of what I share but everything I do share is true, honest, and authentic. Like, and I think that, you know, For me, like, it's always about, if you're going to share something, is it going to have an overall positive outcome? Like, is it going to, on the balance of life, be more positive than negative? And there are some things that aren't, so I don't share them. And that's not that, like, I'm keeping them from, like, but it's just things that, like, at the moment, they just don't need to be out there, or there's some things that will never be out there, some things that it's not the right time, some things I need to process first, all that kind of thing. But all the bits that I do are very authentic and true. However, obviously, like with anything, I think, especially like in the stages of like my journey, and like I think when it comes to like raw, like messy content, like the messy part of life, it's really tricky, because I think that up until a certain point, actually, it's unhelpful to share that, because, you know, your own brain, like you as in the person who's sharing, is unable to maybe like see it as rationally in the moment. And I think then obviously, like, you never want to do anything that's going to make things worse in life. But like, I think for me now, I am at a stage where I've kind of come through a certain part of it, and like life is obviously still ridiculously hard, but I have more of an understanding, and therefore even in the moments of like carnage, and obviously there are still points of life where like I am in complete like breakdown, and obviously that is not going to be something that I share, just mainly because it's just not helpful for anyone. It's not helpful for me because I like have such a catastrophizing mindset, but like I do feel like I can share a bit more of like the messy side of life, because I do think that like I'm in a stage where I can show it in the authentic way that it is, but also being able to like caveat and show it with like kind of the narrative around that like makes it helpful and not a hindrance, if that makes sense. I don't even know if that makes sense. And whether that's even what people want to hear, but I do feel like for me, it's really tricky, because I feel like there are like two extremes. We have like obviously the unhelpful content within like life of like whether that be mental health, neurodivergence, trauma, all that kind of stuff that isn't helpful. And then you have like the other end where people kind of are further removed from that situation, and like it can be hard to kind of see the process between those two things. And obviously like there is a stage of the process that's unhelpful, like to document at the time, but I think like as you go through on the later stage, there is like ways of like, depending on how people are, like how they process. And I think that the main thing I would say is that with anything, like if you're listening to this and you're neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, complex PTSD, you know, you struggle with your mental health, you're trying to find who you are in your identity, the main thing like I want to say is that your own journey is your journey, and you cannot, and I know people say this all the time, like we hear it all of the time online, but like you cannot compare your journey to anybody else's journey, and we all know that. But then it's also like, yeah, but I don't know, like, even where to start. And this is something that I really had for so long, of like people saying you can't like compare. You're like, okay, well, I don't even want to compare, but I don't know where to even like begin. Like I need a set point, like I need some kind of template to begin, and then I can like go off and find who I am and what I want to do. And I think that that's like the biggest thing that I've learned in my journey is it's about basically being really, really honest with yourself. Ultimately, you are the only person who truly knows what you think and feel, and other people might tell you that or think that you're copying, or that you're, you know, whatever. And ultimately, like, as jarring as it is, and it is jarring, don't get me wrong, it is that thing of, and that doesn't make it any easier, and it doesn't make it any like less hurt when people do judge or like think you're doing something that you're not. But like if we peel all of the layers back, the ultimate thing is you know you, and you don't, and no one else needs to know your truth apart from you, but you do need to, like, you know your truth, and you know whether you're doing something for the right or the wrong reasons. And for so long, like, I couldn't even admit to myself, and I think that there is such a big like journey of going through, like, you know, but the biggest change I found was when I was able to be really, really like truthful to myself and like honest and like know my truth. Like I know my truth. I know in life the things of which like what I really feel about things. And that takes a time to learn that, and it takes a lot of like unmasking and then like learning and like being able to be comfortable in like not knowing your opinion on something for a bit, and kind of questioning like your reasons behind things. And I think that like no one else actually needs to know your reason, and it can be something that you forever keep to yourself. But if you know your truth, that is like the strongest base. And I think that like that is the biggest thing, that when it comes to like creating this life for yourself and like finding out like who you are, it's being able to strip it all right back and go, okay, like, and being able to be honest. And like as people, we do copy. Like there is no original ideas. They say that all of the time. And I think that when it comes to like the current narrative around like overdiagnosis of autism and ADHD and like the kind of mental health epidemic that's going on, and then also like the potential, you know, we all like the whole thing of like people, everyone wants a label and everyone's got this and everyone's got that. And I think that like I have lots of very strong opinions on all of those things. And I think I sit in a position where I don't agree in terms of like the fact that there's overdiagnosis, especially when it comes to autism and ADHD. But although I am in no position to like say really, because, you know, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a researcher, and that isn't what this podcast is about. You know, always the disclaimer, not a doctor, not giving advice, just sharing my story. And if bits resonate with you, that's great. And if they don't, if you find it entertaining, continue listening. Like, give me a 5-star review on Spotify would be big love. You know, subscribe to the YouTube where I'm posting the video of this. Big love. Follow the Instagram. Big love. But it's, for me, I know, I've completely lost my train of thought, but I'm coming back. I know what I was going to say. One point at a time, Hannah, one point at a time. When I was in my journey, I followed loads of blogs, loads of social media, watched loads of things, read loads of books. Did I do that to gain tips on how to be more autistic or more ADHD? No. And I don't agree with that narrative. What I did was I read all of these things, I looked at all these things, and then I looked at them subjectively in like an educational way and was like, oh my goodness, that's so interesting. That's so interesting. I don't think I agree with that. Or, oh my gosh, I do agree with that. But I don't want to agree with that. But I do think that is me. And I took all of these things, like, first of all, like, the information. So, like, I learn about autism and ADHD. If we keep, like, onto the neurodivergence for now. I learned about them. I learned about them from a scientific point of view, a psychological, a philosophical, a sociological point of view. I learned them academically. Then looked at, like, obviously, I had a diagnosis. So I looked at the diagnostic criteria and I understood that from a medical point of view. Then I looked at it from a social point of view. And then I kind of went through people's stories and their lived experiences and their anecdotes and all of that as information gathering. And then while I was doing that, on the other side, I was working on myself, learning who I was. I say it away from the labels, not away from being autistic and ADHD. That is my neurotype. I can't untangle the two because that is just who I am, because that's the way my brain's made. I have a neurodivergent brain, so my brain is just that way. But in terms of the like label of like the medical model of like disability, I looked at them as separate things and then kind of brought it together in a way that like fits me. Because I had like the work on myself, the medical model, other people's stories, boom, 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 creating little Hannah in the middle. And like I think that I don't think that's a very, very good way of explaining it. It probably still doesn't make any sense. But that is like my big passion of like other people's stories, peer support, lived experience is amazing. And I think that it does get a bit of a stick when it comes to things like this because people misunderstand the use of it. And I think that like, you know, if I watch somebody else's story, you know, I hear about how somebody else is like doing stuff, I know that I am not that person. And so in so many different ways, like what works for them is not necessarily going to work for me. What works for me isn't necessarily going to work for them. Just because you have the same label does not mean you have the same life. Like there is a difference between having a diagnosed like label of autism and how you experience autism and how your brain is your autistic brain. Like autism and being autistic, I guess, are different things. Obviously they're not, they are the same, but you know what I mean? Like for me, my experience of autism is still autism, but it's very different to say, you know, my friend Vintage, who they are autistic and they have their autistic brain and we both have a diagnosis of autism, but our experience of autism can be really, really different. And there are things that like Vintage does that they do around their autism that is like wild to me, and that like would be the opposite of help. And there are things that I do that would be the opposite of help for them. But there's also bits that they do that I could have adapted into my own routine in my own way that have really helped. Not because I've taken like, or I'm copying them, but because from having conversations and like learning, there's things that I've gone, oh, I've never even thought of like that as a thing. It wouldn't work for me like that, but this is how, knowing myself, I am able to then go, okay, well, I know my brain works in that way. So if your brain works in that way and that's why you do that, this is how my brain works. So maybe if I try it this way, that could help my brain. And I suppose like it's those kind of things. And I think that we can get so het up in the whole like, you know, all being like so, I don't know, like, I don't even know. I don't know what I was going to say with that. I don't know where I was going. Really ADHD, train of thought just gone. But yeah, so that's kind of one part of it. And then the other part I wanted to say is about like the authenticity and like, oh, actually I need some coffee. With showing up, like it can, I think that there's such a line between, obviously as I said before, like helpful and unhelpful content. And I'm always like dancing around like that line, like making sure that I don't go over, and because I never want to create anything unhelpful. And actually, like, I've had a few situations recently where that kind of thing, not in terms of online stuff, but in like in person, and it's like one of my biggest triggers. It's my biggest fear. I never ever want to make anything worse, but you know, having lived this life, I don't want to be part of, and having, you know, especially within social media, like when I was when I was like 14, 15, I was in, you know, a really unhealthy community, like online, in relation to like eating disorders and mental health, and it was just like so toxic, and it really was so unhelpful. And like, it's funny because at the time, like, Beverly would be like, you know, it's making it worse, and I was like, no, it's not, you don't understand. And actually in 2020 I deleted all of my social media, and that was the beginning of my recovery. Like, more so, you know, obviously there was lots of other like things that happened as well at the same time, but it really was so toxic, like, and I do know how damaging it can be, and so it's not something I ever want to partake in. But I also know that like there is so many people on social media, and you know, we're not getting rid of social media, so I want to create a little place on this kind of big wide internet that like is a place where hopefully, you know, at least somebody can see and go, you know, can see part like of themselves in aspects of my story or other people's stories that I share. And like, again, obviously it's all individual, but I came, you know, from a background of a lot of difficulties, and I came from a background of, you know, some really challenging things, and like I'm still living it. Like it's not like I'm like I had this but now like I'm this like perfect, even though there's no such thing as a perfect human being. And I think that I want to really show that like the true kind of belief of like what life can look like after the struggle. And that doesn't mean that there is not still struggles, but it's not all struggle. And I think that like for me, even like probably when I was like 18, 19, and like still following like a lot of people online who had like recovered, I still couldn't see my kind of life and experiences in that. And I think that like it's so interesting that actually like for me, the difficulty of like after the struggle when was like trying to learning how to live actually was the hardest bit. And I think that's why like I ended up being a revolving door patient for so long. And I think, you know, when I see other people online and people like who I was friends with, you know, during my journey, and seeing them like still stuck in hospitals and things like that, and I think, you know, a lot of it comes from that not the struggle in some ways, but the fear of living, and like not knowing how life can look, and not knowing how to create a life, and not knowing how to kind of navigate the lows and the highs that come with just normal everyday life. And also that thing of like, you know, online we see a lot of people who, you know, almost become influencers, you know, from this thing, and it's like obviously that's not necessarily realistic or even something that most people want. So actually like what is life outside of that? Like what does recovered life look like, you know? And I think that's something that I really want to share. And especially like for me, like the power of creativity is so massive. And like it really is what I used. And like I want to get better at like explaining how I used it. And obviously again, so unique, so different for everybody. But like that thing of, you know, having your outlet, having your escape. And like it's really tricky because there's a lot of those things that, like I say, Cams gave out the advice and look like at the time is so jarring and so annoying and so not helpful. But actually, when you get to like this stage, like where I am in my like recovery journey, there is so much truth in them, but they are misunderstood and misconstrued and misinformed at the time that they are given. And I think that like it can be so hard that, because often these kind of tips are given during a time of crisis where they're not any help, but then it puts people off. And so like people are like, because I am so that person, like it doesn't work for me, but actually it doesn't work for me in a crisis moment, no. But actually there are aspects of these things that do work and are helpful for me and I can implement into my life in other parts, but because I've had such a negative experience of them, I'm like, no, I don't want to, because I don't think they're going to work. And I want to unpack some of the, maybe that's a series, maybe that's a series unpacking some of the myths and like, and some of the like misconstrued information and like how some of them I still don't use and they don't work for me. And that's just me personally. But so a lot of them I have implemented into my life and they do really work. My mindset has changed and when and where I use them is different to when like I was told to use them, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think it's like I don't like know where I'm going with my like legally detained, and it's something that I'm wanting to develop further into like my activism and like my work, and eventually like into kind of creating more concrete resources for people. And I think that that's something that's like really hard because I'm not a medical professional, I'm not a counsellor, I'm not any of those things, and I don't want to be any of those things, and I don't want to give out advice because I've got absolutely no place to be giving out advice. However, going through stuff, like I could never find like the information that I wanted, or like the kind of like worksheets or whatever that like are like a kind of like a formula that you then apply to yourself. So it's not like other people, because I do think that like no one else can tell you how to do it. That doesn't help. But you can't just pluck it out of thin air. And I think there is a difference between like being told how to do something and being given like resources that allow you to figure it out yourself. And I think that is what I want to help create, because that is the thing that I was missing. Was there was a lot of advice, people telling me, and then that didn't really work. Like I like the information, but then it's like a formula of like putting it through that then like you can interpret it in your own way, and that is something that I want to do more of. So if you've got this far and listened to this far of this episode, that is really cool. Thank you so much. Please comment. I think let's comment the hippo emoji. Surely there's got to be a hippo emoji. That can be the little thing of like, if you get to the ends of episodes, like whatever jellycat that I've got in the episode, you can comment that emoji and I will love you forever. And if I'm not really following you back, I will follow you back on socials because that's iconic. Almost certainly I probably do, because I don't know who actually listens to these. Probably just Beverly. And I do actually follow you back, Beverly. So all's good. But yeah, what was I going to say? Completely lost my train of thought. But yeah, no, please do let me know of things you want to hear on this podcast, because I have had a few messages of people being like, oh my god, I love your podcast, which actually means so much. Like genuinely, every time I hear someone's actually listened to an episode that's not my mom, I'm like, and especially if they like it, I'm like, stop it. But yeah, if there are things that you would find interesting, please let me know. Also, please do share with anyone who could be helpful. Please share on your Instagram, please share on your socials, LinkedIn, I don't care. On your family WhatsApp group, anywhere, any sharing is amazing. And yeah, let's keep living authentically. And yeah, it's all a lot out here. Life is a lot. It's all a bit much, but we're going to navigate this together. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep living unapologetically and authentically. And follow my TikToks for kind of very rambly, basically, but that's going to be like my digital meltdown of just like, follow my professional Instagram for Legally Detained, the podcast, NLLD, the podcast. And yeah, I will see you all next week for another episode. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for being here. Thank you for living, existing and being. You're amazing. And remember that your life is a radical act of defiance. Lots of love.